Okay, some quick UK school jargon. Primary school is from ages 4 to 11, and these are called years 1 to 6. Then you go into secondary or comprehensive school, and this is from ages 11 to 16, and these are called years 7 to 11. And that's all you need to know to understand how our schools work for this story. I'd like to bet that most of you had at least one close friend growing up. Primary school wasn't the worst for me, but it wasn't particularly great either. I just kind of got through it. I had some friends, I guess. I didn't ever feel super alone, but then again, I never had a best friend. I never felt that these kids that were friends with me would ever actually stick their neck up for me if I needed it. And the one kid I was most close to, let's call him Justin. Oh, he ended up being a massive creep later on in my teens. Ugh. My secondary school experience, however, was a lot worse. Okay, it was pretty awful. And to be honest, this story does affect how I dealt with friendships in my early teens. So stay tuned for my secondary school story, because that's a whole other load of tea to be spilt in itself. Gosh. So let's turn back the clock to the late 90s. In primary school, this wasn't a rule as such, but generally the girls would play with the other girls and the boys would stick with the boys. As unfair as the stereotype reinforced divide was, I found myself naturally being drawn towards playing with the boys, often being faced with, "You can't play with us because you're a girl." But fortunately, this wasn't always the case. You see, it was usually the guys who wanted to have pretend Pokemon battles, so I was so down for that. I also played my fair share of football, soccer, rugby, and British Bulldogs. I even proudly lost a tooth in the battlefield by being tackled to the floor and jamming my head down with such force that my tooth had become embedded into my tongue. Come on, guys, you all know I probably cried. Most of the kids were mortified at the sight of this, and rightly so, it was gross. But there was one girl that wasn't horrified, and this girl also liked to play rough with the boys and didn't seem that interested in dolls. Tick. I discovered that she was actually into a lot of the same things that I was. Tick, tick, tick. She was the only girl in my class that seemed remotely like me. The only one I could relate to, and thus began my journey of trying to befriend her. Let's call her Megan. I literally Googled popular girls' names in the 90s and picked one that wasn't in my class. She wasn't particularly the prettiest or the smartest or the hardest working. She wasn't the sportiest or the most arty, but have a guess who took that crown. But of course, none of that would have mattered if she was a friend. But as I would discover, she certainly wasn't the nicest kid either. But as I learned the hard way, you can't make people like you. You can't make people care about you. And you definitely shouldn't let them manipulate or hurt you. Anyway, let's get back to where this all kicked off. That beautiful sweet spot in the late 90s where the Pokemon craze first took hold of the nation. Most kids had binders full of cards, and yet nobody really knew how to actually play the card game itself. Apart from this nerd, I had a pretty impressive collection myself, with shinies galore. I even owned the original elusive shiny Charizard. One of my prized possessions, however, was the shiny ancient MEOW that was given away with select cinema ticket screenings of the first Pokemon movie. Man, that's going back quite a few years now. Reflecting on it now, a lot of kids went to see that movie, so they definitely aren't exactly rare cards. But, you know, by the way I treated it, you'd have thought it was solid gold or something. To me, this was the coolest gosh darn card I'd ever seen, and I never took it out of its binder. It was that precious to me. Anyway, somehow I managed to invite Megan over to stay at mine, and this was a rare occurrence. I didn't often have friends stay at mine, but I was so excited. Mainly because she was the only other kid I knew that played Neopets anywhere near as religiously as me. People, it was a grind. Gosh, I could make a whole video on my love of Neopets. And they are still dying of hunger to this day. So she stayed the night, and I don't recall of much else of what happened, but I do remember her asking to see my Pokemon card collection. To which, of course, I enthusiastically complied. We flicked through page after page of my thick binder, and she eagerly pointed out the cards that she'd longed for. The next day, her grandfather picked her up in the morning, and that was that. Pretty uneventful. Also, I thought. Suddenly, my mum turns around and glares at me. She says, snarling, "Did you give her your Pokemon cards?" I stammer, "No." but I'm also laughing a little. I used to do this when I was uncomfortable as a kid. In an attempt to be intimidating, my mother would literally curl her lips like a snarling dog. And I always found this a really difficult emotion to comprehend because it just looked so ridiculous, like she was putting it on. However, because I was laughing uncomfortably, she immediately assumed I was hiding something. I found your cards in her bag. I didn't give them to her. You must have put them in her bag then. Why would you give your cards away? No, I didn't. Oh, so she stole them then? She wouldn't do that, would she? My mother continued to interrogate me and then placed these stolen cards on the table. And amongst those cards was my prized, shiny, ancient MEOW. These kinds of emotions, I guess, are difficult to understand as a 6-year-old, but I definitely felt a bit sick. I couldn't believe that my friend would have done this to me. 6 years old and a thief. No way. She was my friend. Why would she do this? It must be a mistake. So the next day, I sheepishly questioned her about it in school, but she just fiercely denied it. So instead of arguing, I just distanced myself from her. I was hurt and confused. Good people don't do that, right? I don't know whether it was this particular event that triggered it, me calling her out, but after this point, Megan became increasingly manipulative and just downright mean towards me. I just didn't want to believe she was a bad kid, so I kept trying to be her friend. For example, one Valentine's Day, my class had to write out cards to all our friends, and emphasis on the friends because as a 7 to 8-year-old, it's obviously platonic. All the kids in the class just sent them to everybody like a Christmas card. Well, I didn't get a card, so I guess she didn't choose me. And when I actually asked her about it, she told me that she couldn't give a Valentine's card to another girl because that was gross. Of course, she had actually given them out to other girls along with the boys. She just didn't give me a card. My little heart, it hurts. But I still held out hope. Later that year, I visited Florida for the second time ever. It was, the standard Disney vacay, but this time I actually knew how to get my hands on Neopets merch. I begged my dad to drive all the way out to Florida Mall so that we could visit a shop called Limited 2, just for Neopet stuff. Anyway, I didn't have lots of pocket money to spend and plushies weren't cheap, but I decided it would be really nice to buy a plushie for Megan since there was no way for her to get one over in the UK. Silly 7-year-old Amy, you can't buy other people's love. Yeah, when I gave it to Megan, it didn't quite evoke the reaction I was dreaming it would. In my head, it was sort of, oh my gosh, I've always wanted a Neopet plushie. Oh, thank you so much. That's so thoughtful. And then we would hug and then we'd be best friends forever. How it actually transpired is that I gave her the plushie and she just went, oh, and put it in her bag. There are a lot of other attempts to win her friendship that didn't involve buying plushies. But the final straw was when we were in year 6 in the last year of primary school. And as a celebration before we transitioned into secondary school, we got to embark on a trip to Euro Disney. You had to pick a partner to share a room with and sit on the coach. I thought I'd try my luck one more time since I wasn't allowed to stay in the room with the guys. You had to pair up with a girl. So I asked Megan if she'd be my partner. And to my delight, she said yes. Oh my gosh, I was thrilled, but still, I was left thinking, why would she suddenly say yes? I wasn't expecting her to say yes, but she said yes. So I just kept double checking with her to make sure she was still okay with having me as her partner. 2 months before the trip, a month, 2 weeks, a week. I just wanted to be sure. She'd just smile and assure me all was well. I thought she'd finally decided I was a worthy friend. That cemented my decision to put her high on the list of kids I'd like to be in the same year group as when we were transitioning to our secondary school. I put her name at the top, above Justin. Then the day of the trip finally arrived and my dad had dropped me off and we were loading our small suitcases into the base of the bus. I turn around and look for Megan and she's not there. It's okay though, I'm not worried. She's probably just on the bus waiting for me. So I clamber on, kind of excited and glancing back and forth between the rows and finally see her near the back, sitting next to Anna, another girl from my class. Okay, don't panic. She's just sitting next to somebody while she was waiting for me. Yeah, that's right. Hey Megan, I thought you said you were going to be my partner. And they look at each other and Anna smirks a little at me, saying, "Oh, didn't Megan tell you that she changed her mind ages ago and is sharing a room with me?" And they both just started laughing at me. You know that feeling, the sickening, sinking feeling in your gut? Feeling the tears welling in your eyes and the slow tightening of your throat? The feeling that if you were to say anything at all at that moment, you just burst into tears right in front of everyone. Yeah, I had to push that one down. I sat alone on the bus, and nobody came to help me. What was I going to do now? Worst of all, there weren't any more girls I could group up with from my class, so I had to share with a girl that I didn't even know from another school, since a few schools were doing the same trip. I couldn't bring myself to face Megan again. I thought I'd just cry. So I tagged along with another group of girls from my class, but I was very aware that I was cramping their style. Like, I knew they didn't want me there. I felt so alone on that trip. No 10-year-old should have to feel like that. Heck, nobody of any age should have to feel so left out. A few weeks later, we had our letters on our year group allocations for the new school, and Megan was in my class. Justin was not. And so, unfortunately, the years to come wouldn't be much more kind to me. It got so much worse. I really wish I could show younger me all of the bright things in my future, all of the wonderful people I'd meet and all the lifelong friends I'd make later on down the line. I can't do this for my past self, but you can, with the current people that surround you. If you see anyone in a situation like this, please, please, please reach out. Nobody once stopped to ask me why I was crying or why I was sitting alone or if I was okay. Nobody invited me to join in when I was obviously lonely and struggling. Kindness is your greatest strength, because not only could you make someone's day, you have the power to shape somebody's life for the better, especially in the younger years. I never hated Megan for this, and she was never obliged to be friends with me in the first place, and that's okay. Not everyone is going to like you, and that's just something you need to accept. But it's not okay to string another person along and then leave them out in the cold, laughing at their misfortunes. I always thought it was something wrong with me. There's just kids being mean, and it's pathetic. Megan is an adult now. I don't know what she's doing, and she's probably a far better person than when she was a kid. But her actions had a long-lasting effect on me that terrified me of friendships. Your actions really do make impact on the people around you. So whenever you can, I hope you choose compassion and kindness. Who knows, maybe someday you'll be surprised to see a video about how you changed somebody's whole life for the better by just being kind to them. Wouldn't that be neat? An Amy Write MEOW video. It all starts off with fun and games and then descends into darkness, life lessons and morals. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you for watching. If you've been living under a rock and haven't seen my Twitter or Instagram updates, I'd highly recommend you follow me on those platforms because that's where I'm most active. I've got big plans for 2019, and I hope you'll stick around for all the experiences and stories I'd like to tell. Some of them are a little more upbeat. Some of them, maybe not so much. I do want to tackle my mum's story at some point. I will need a little bit of extra support down the line to make my videos, so expect that shameless merch plug. But, you know me. It'll be cool stuff. Thank you again. I couldn't even consider doing this without your support. See you guys on the flippity flip.